When did you know your significant other was the one? When we were arguing, but it didn't feel like we were fighting each other, but that we were just two frustrated people trying to better understand the other. Never experienced it before, and it honestly made me feel so much less angry in that moment. She was my friend first. I realized that I compared all women to her. She was my gold standard for what I wanted in a woman. The night we met, all I wanted to do was be next to her. She is everything I could ever ask for. My best friend, my soulmate, and the best thing that ever happened to me. 24 years together, and it pains me to say she passed away 15 months ago at only 41 years old. I can't stand to wake up in the morning knowing she won't be there. My life and heart is forever broken and will never be the same. Without a doubt, I am a better man and father to our 3 beautiful kids because of her. Stephanie, I will forever be totally and completely in love with you and only you. You know how there's nowhere quite like home? Loads of places you love to be, but home just feels right. You can relax there like nowhere else. It's safe, all your favorite stuff is there. It even feels like a sigh of relief to come home. That's what being with him is like. When I come home to him, I'm coming home twice. When I felt safe around her. I grew up in pretty bad circumstances. I didn't feel safe at home or at school. I developed pretty bad PTSD and depression. I eventually got out of that situation probably a lot later than I should have. In my new home, I felt safer, but I didn't exactly feel like life was all that worth living anymore, despite giving myself a second chance to just get well again. Well, when she came along, I don't know what it was, but I just felt so secure around her. I felt like I could be myself for the first time in my whole life. She reassured me that she didn't care what I had gone through and what those situations shaped me into. She just wanted to make me feel like I had her. I fell in love at the moment. We're still going strong. I told her that people make fun of me for talking about my favorite book series too much, and she started reading the entire series, so I had someone to talk to about it. When we first met, I felt something I couldn't explain, almost like a gravitational pull. We had been dating a few months, and then one day while cuddling on the couch, I just felt so calm and warm. Like a wave of bliss that washed over me. He is without a shadow of a doubt my person. I've never loved someone with my whole being as much as I love him, and every day I somehow manage to love him more. He's my best friend, and I'm thankful every day we get to enjoy another day together. When I got COVID and we were quarantined to our bedroom/bathroom for 10 days. And I was kinda sad when it was over. The day my friends started talking about their normal everyday wifey problems and said these things are common in marriage. That's when I realized how lucky I am. When my husband and I had been together just over a year, my brother passed from brain cancer and we were at their house within 5 minutes. When the funeral home came to pick up his body, the 2 workers were unable to carry my brother's body out of the house by themselves, and so my husband stepped in and helped them do it. That's when I knew. We had been dating a little over a year in high school. My mom's car got stuck on our country road during a snowstorm. My boyfriend put on his snow gear and started walking the half-mile from my house to where she was stuck, followed by our 3-legged bloodhound. My mom said she looked up and saw him walking in the distance carrying something. My dog had gotten tired hopping in the snow, so he carried her all the way to the car, then proceeded to try and dig my mom out. He got the mom stamp of approval, the dog stamp of approval, and my heart. When his happiness became more important to me than my happiness. That only works if your happiness is more important to him than his, if you prioritize each other. They've that with my husband. Every day I do my best for him to have the best day ever, and he does the same for me. Sometimes it's funny because we have the same idea and surprise each other with the same loving gesture, like for example, I spontaneously decide to go grocery shopping and cook his favorite dish, and when I come back I find him in the kitchen cooking my favorite dish. I got glass in my foot about a month after we started dating. We were both mid-30s with significant relationships behind us, but I felt more comfortable with him than I'd ever felt in a relationship before. I was in a lot of pain from stupidly stepping on glass, and my husband grabbed a headlamp and tweezers, got down on the floor, and tenderly took the pieces of glass out of my foot. I can't remember the exact silly dad joke he made to distract me from it, but it hit mine out of nowhere as I was laughing that we were going to get married, have kids. This was my person. Since I was a teenager, I haven't had nightmares because I can control my dreams. When there's a dangerous situation in my dream, I replay it over and over until I find a solution. Then I wake up and remember the results of my training simulation. One night I woke up in a cold sweat because nightmared that she was engaged to someone else. I felt like I'd lost at life. Went out ring shopping that day. I had a life flashing before my eyes kind of moment where I imagined what life would look like together, us getting older and having kids. I was only 17 at the time and she had just gotten out of a messy breakup. 2 years later we were dating and now we're in our 30s, we've been married for nearly 10 years, and have 3 kids together. Our life looks strangely like Elle imagined it all those years ago. After we broke up, my wife and I were high school sweethearts who went to colleges quite a way apart. We tried long distance for a couple years, but in the end it was just too much. For a while after we broke up it was like nothing changed. She was still my best friend. We still called and talked every day. A year later we decided to do a hard break, as it was what our relationship needed. We both saw other people and moved on, but a couple years later I still missed my best friend and talking to her all the time. Turns out she felt the same way and contacted me out of nowhere. We've been married 7 years next week and our second kid is due in 2 weeks. I wouldn't change anything about my life, and she's the best part of it. When we went on our first road trip and never argued in the car. We started out as friends that talk for hours. I never really thought of her being the one back then, I just improved myself to be the one for her. We had been dating for a few months and I had a moment looking at him napping on the train. I realized things just stopped with him, jealousy gone, insecurities lost, hurt I carried with me from the past just disappeared. None of it ever came back and have been at peace ever since and get so much joy out of seeing him happy. We've been together 9 years, married for 1, expecting our first child. And still laugh uncontrollably with each other every single day. We were so poor our second date was walking a mile or 2 to a Little Caesars and sharing a pizza and a 2-liter of soda, sitting on the sidewalk, and talking for hours. That night, on that curb, I knew. Me and my now wife were only dating for about 6 or so months, maybe not even that. But I was standing on the roof of a car park watching a band play at a festival down below, had all my mates there with mine and she wasn't. But all I could think about her and how no matter where in the world I was that only person I wanted to be with was her. From the very first few conversations it felt like was just picking up where I had left off with an old friend. We would lose track of time just chatting about everything and nothing. Silence was natural, and mutual attraction sealed it. A friend of mine drunkenly asked my girlfriend of a 6 months, so when did you know he was the one, and she said when he showed me his spreadsheets. To be fair, I have some very nice spreadsheets. We had been dating for a few weeks, decided to go to New York, and everything went great, despite all the stresses of traveling. I had a pretty good idea we could make a proper go of it after that. Our first trip together was a 7-day rafting trip through the Grand Canyon and the only bump was a disagreement on a camping spot on the last night. We've had more bumps, but we'll be married 16 years in July. We went on a 10-day road trip to Yellowstone. We were in the car together for 10 solid days, and even when we weren't in the car we were walking around Yellowstone together / in the motel room. We didn't argue once. The whole trip. We had a few differences of opinion, but we were calm and I never felt like I was fighting with him, but more like working together to solve the problem. Even at the end of driving 14 hours there, driving all around Yellowstone / Grand Teton, and driving 14 hours back, we were still getting along. We did 2 more trips like that over the next decade, plus a cross-country move, and there's no one I'd rather be stuck in a car with. 22 years together this fall. Stupid as it sounds, 4 months into our relationship when he said he loved me and I replied, wait, really? Just because I couldn't believe someone could love me like I love them. That small moment kinda cemented everything and we're on 7.5 years, have a house, 5 cats, and plan to get engaged when finances align. About 5 minutes after I met her, Still took me a month to find my balls and ask her out. Been an amazing 26 years. My boyfriend and I were on the phone, long distance, and he'd been telling me he loved me for a little while, but I hadn't been able to say it back. I wanted to know 100%, and we were staying up late watching a movie. I was so sleepy, we were just sitting there in silence. When I heard his voice, it calmed me down so much. He just sounded so soothing and safe, which was extremely rare for me to feel with people, as I'm sure is true for so many, as trust is broken more than it's kept safe. Really never outside of my mom and sister did I feel safe with someone, and lying there in quiet with him laughing and commenting every once in a while, I realized I just loved him so much and was ready to say it. That's when I knew I was in love, but it's hard to say when you know someone is the one. Is that a real thing? I guess it depends on your perspective. He's guided me through so much and always felt safe to me, so I guess his recurring behaviors affirming my sense of safety reiterate feeling like he's the one. Smiley face. Reading these posts was so lovely. He just pulled all my heartstrings with his romantic ways. I don't want to be without him ever. He's so kind and loving. When he didn't shame me for having a mental illness like everyone else. When I first met him, he felt so very familiar to me, as if I'd known him forever. I wanted to be with him all the time, and now nearly 30 years later, those sentiments haven't changed. Went to Disneyland 4 months in. The entire trip he never lost his patience at the long lines or long days, and stayed positive. I was sure after that if anyone is going to mistreat you, it'll be at Disneyland. I'm gonna guess formatting is gonna be screwed up because I have no idea how to create enter lines. Apologies. Our first date we laid it all on the table, talked about what we'd been through, what we were working through, and how we were doing that. A few weeks later he did something that triggered me. It took everything in me not to revert to my old behaviors, but I did let him know it upset me. After he was done with his previous engagement, he shot me a message, picked me up at midnight, and we grabbed a coffee and drove around talking about it. He told me my PTSD from previous abuse in relationships did not mean I was not worthy of love or a healthy relationship, and that it didn't change how he felt about me. I pretty much knew then. A few weeks after that, my stepfather had an aneurysm and passed away. He got out of bed after working a 12-hour night shift, drove with me and my kids the 3 hours to my mother's, stayed with the Keatses while she and I were at the hospital, then drove the kids home a couple days later while Elle stayed with my mother to make funeral arrangements. The whole time I'm sobbing because I lost a man I considered my tather, and he was so helpful, compassionate, and available. I told him I was going to marry him. He laughed and said, "Aren't you supposed to ask?" I told him it wasn't a question. We were engaged 6 months into our relationship, and it has been the most emotionally stable, rewarding, and best thing I ever did. Third time's a charm, I suppose. At the end of our first date she shook my hand at her door. As walked to my car I was telling myself, way to go idiot, you f***ed it up so bad she shook your hand. We worked together and she came up and apologized to me the next day, saying she hadn't been on a date in a while and didn't really know how to end the date. That was when I knew. We actually came up with our own handshake that we even did at our wedding. It's been 16 years and not a day goes by that I don't remind myself how lucky I am to have met her. We were moving out of a house with a bunch of roommates to another apartment. All the other roommates had already moved out, so it was just us. He and I were left to clean the place top to bottom, deal with the Basil Lion cardboard boxes and crap left in the basement, return the keys, try to get the security deposit back, like the whole damn shebang. It was a lot to do. He and I worked together like an incredible team. He didn't keep asking me what should I do now, he just did. He took care of stuff while I did too. We helped each other and supported each other. I was already moving towards knowing he was the one for me, but knowing he was such an amazing teammate is what finally locked it in. I think life and marriage is the kind of thing where you need to be a team. You need to work together and fight back to back, and here was the man of my dreams who I was already in love with, who 100% was going to be supportive and functional and not a damn man-child. There are 100 other reasons he is the one for me, a million reasons. But after this situation, and moving into the new place, I was awake that night looking at him and for the first time thought to myself, I want to marry this man. We've been together 11 years, and I still think to myself every day how much I absolutely love this man. I kind of had a gut feeling the moment we met, but two things solidified it. The first was that during our very first conversation, she pulled out a tin of chocolates and was sharing them around, and when she got to me she paused, looked at me, and then reached in and pulled out my two favorites. We'd met about half an hour ago at this point, and as you can imagine, this had not come up. Amazed, I asked her how she knew those were my favorites, and she said because they're mine, too. The second one is because I'm pretty sure fate conspired to get us to meet again. We met at a very specific place, Everest Base Camp. We were each with a different group of people, each with our own schedule, so while we caught one another occasionally it wasn't with any regularity. When I left, I had to do so pretty suddenly, and didn't get the chance to let her know or exchange any details. Fast forward around 8 months. I've mostly recovered from my ordeal and I'm working to gain experience for my university course, at the place where I now work full-time. I'm an archivist, working in a very specific archive. Guess who walks in one day because she's studying this same specific thing? My future wife. We've been married for almost 5 years now, and these are not the only things like this that have happened in our lives. Fate is a funny thing. When he dodged bullets and moved like one of the agents. When he put on an album by my favorite artist, live through this by whole. First date, we went to a place that does wine and cheese samples. The waitress asked if we would like the small or the large serving. My now wife and mother of my son immediately answers the large serve, of course. That sealed the deal. The fact that I saw her walking towards the restaurant and thought she was an absolute knockout didn't hurt either. When I realized I genuinely enjoy being around them, being genuinely happy. Feel like it might be hard to explain, but that's the gist. Hella cheesy, but when I first approached him while he was at band practice, my friend was his drummer. After talking for a couple days I was already into him and didn't see us breaking up, which weirded me out. LOL. I avoided dating him for 2 years cause we were hella young, but every time I thought about us dating knew we wouldn't break up ever. 10 years and I'm still right. Kind of weird and unbelievable, but I knew it before I met her. I'm not a spiritual guy in any way, I'm more of a skeptic, but my ex was very spiritual. He requested we got a soulmate tarot reading together. Well, we did, and the reading talked about my soulmate being somebody I would meet later, basically just giving me a bunch of information on this soulmate of mine. I don't exactly remember what was said anymore, but I do know it was kind of specific and detailed. Anyway, I met her, and about half a year in is when I realized she was exactly how that tarot reader described. Craziest thing I've experienced. I'm still not spiritual though, LOL.